What's up, guys? It's Ruben from Galantes here, today with another devlog, but it is also today that I came to the realization that the videos I've done so far aren't really devlogs, at least from what I've seen from other devlogs on YouTube. They are a lot more technical, more in detail. They show steps along the process, how they encounter problem, how they deal with it, and I did this a little bit, I guess, but not as much as some of you might like. So please also let me know in the comments if you would like to have more in detail steps of the process and how we handle things. Because until now, I was like, whenever I had the time, I worked on the project, and on the day of the upload, I would make these videos, try to make them a little bit entertaining and to recap what has been done. But it didn't show the steps I took or we took along the process. From today on, I will try to also capture some video material, maybe talk over it already while I'm working on the project, or if someone of the other contributors has something done on the project, just to show how we implement things, not just what we've implemented. Even though for today's video I do not have yet that material because I still have just done everything and today is the upload. For the future, I will try to change that. So please let me know in the comments if you like that or if you think it's too technical. And I'll try my best as a newbie to explain how everything works, or at least to my understanding. So if you spot a mistake, you can also correct it, of course. For today, I told you that I was refactoring the scripts, making it a little bit modular. I'm going to show you in an overview how the most important scripts and components work together to make the movement, camera control, and enemies possible, and also make interactions possible between them. So that is going to be the start. And we also implemented a lock-on mechanic. It's not polished yet, but it does its job. Its basic job at what it should do. So I will show you that, and also show you then in the overview which components were involved in this one. So without further ado, let's jump into the overview. And yes, because I'm starting to get old, we are gonna do this in PowerPoint. So just to quickly explain, on the left side, so separated by the vertical line, are a component and a script which are not actually in the game itself, but they form the interface with which the player can interact with the game. And everything on the right side of this line is actually going to be in-game, if you want. I mean, in the end, everything is in the game, but just so you know, this is where the interface or the interaction with the player happens. The first component is the built-in Unity input system. It allows to capture player input from keyboard, mouse, controller, whatever you plug in to play. It is going to capture the inputs, and the input manager script, which I wrote, is actually going to translate those inputs and make them available for all other scripts and components in-game. For example, if you hit the left mouse button, the input system is going to recognize that as the left mouse button, and if it's being clicked or held, and it's going to relay that information to the input manager. And in the input manager, we have a timer to see how long it was clicked, because if it's being held, then it's going to be the wind-up attack, right? So this is basically done there. So this is all the logic that is in there. It sets flag, for example, when space bar is pressed, it is relaying the information that the jump key has been pressed, and it's gonna set a flag based upon that. And all other in-game components which have a dependency on it, so they include it, they can then retrieve this information and do logic based upon that. So the input system and the input manager script, they work in unison to enable the interaction with the game. Then the two main scripts that work with the input manager are the camera controller and the player controller. So the camera controller mainly reacts to the mouse. So when you are not locked on to a target, you have the ability to move your mouse left and right, up and down to circle the camera around the player. So this is all handled there. But now, since a few days, you can also press the lock on button, which will then change the cameras, which is also handled in the camera controller, to switch to the lock on system. And I will be showing this to you later, but now you know that this is where the magic happens primarily. And then we also have the player controller, which handles all movement, the attacks and everything. Player controller is a pretty huge script. It might also need some more modularization, but as of now it handles a lot of the logic, which actually makes you move, attack, sprint, roll, you name it. To do this, we also have a character controller, which is also coming with Unity, and it allows to move the character easily with some simple already built-in logic, to actually transport the player forward, to move around different heights or slopes. So it reduces the amount of script you need to write to make the character move and move correctly. So it's a fantastic component, and there are a lot of functions you can call for that to help you, a lot of settings. And this is basically what allows us to travel through the world from the component standpoint, and it is controlled by the script player controller. Then to animate Nay, and to not just send her around the world in a T-pose, we have an animator component, which includes all the animations and the transition between animations, and it also has a lot of parameters in there. There's basically also logic there which decides which animation should be played next in case it is not handled by script sometimes. So yeah, this is also really important. And to control that, like to set the respective flags or input parameters, we have the animator controller, which also gets a lot of input from the player controller. For example, when the player controller jumps and therefore is no longer grounded, this information is sent to the animator controller and has a respective boolean there, which says grounded or jump. These are two booleans, and if one of which is activated, it's either gonna play land animation or jump animation, and both of these components know that the player is currently in air or is landing or is on the ground. On the other side of things, we have the enemy state machine, which basically handles, or is the AI of the game, though it's not really AI, it's just predefined behavior, and it's not gonna really change. I do expect some funny interactions though until we polished it. Yeah, I think we will get to see that once we get to fight multiple enemies at once, and or over different terrain or whatever. There will be a lot of shenanigans, I suppose, which we will encounter over the next months. I'm excited for that. Now, the enemy state machine also has an enemy manager. The enemy manager is basically the same thing as the player controller, but instead of reacting to the inputs that the player does, it is managed also by the enemy state machine. So the different states: is it following the player? Is it trying to attack? Is it idle? Is it doing something? Whatever it does. And it relays that information to the Navmesh agent, which, similar to the character controller, has a lot of predefined settings that you can mess with, functions that you can call, that allows you to easily control a object in the game, in this case the enemies, and it also helps you to navigate terrain, because if you were to script all of that, that would be a real hustle, I'm telling you. So I really advise for newbies like me to use Navmesh agent. There's a lot of documentation online for it, so go for that. And similarly to the player, we also have an enemy animator manager, which tells them basically which animations to play based on flags, and yeah, the animator then does the animating of the enemy. Then finally, we also want to see some impact, right? Because until now we only have what moves us and what makes us be animated. And now we have character stats, which is the base script for the player and the enemy stats. So every character has stats like health, agility, strength, resistances, and also a flag that tells us if they are dead or alive. So with that being similar to the player and the enemies, they have a shared base script, which is then extended to the player stats and the enemy stats, which basically incorporate everything that is different between the two. So the character stats, as mentioned, have, for example, health, but they also manage when health changes. For example, if you get hit or if you drink a potion that restores health, it's gonna be managed in there. I might think about splitting that up into a stats manager, but for now, it's all in the same script. And then finally, we have colliders in the game. So the player and the enemy each have body colliders, and they also have damage and blocking colliders, which are usually located either on the weapon or in case of the robots in their arms. So this indicates where or what they can deal damage with, because imagine if you just walk into a robot and their body collider deals damage to you. Wouldn't make too much sense unless it's like it emits heat or flames or is spiked or whatever. But usually you only want to take damage or be able to block something if an action is done before that. And for that we have these extra colliders, which if you get hit by one, let's say the enemy gets hit by one, then the damage collider is going to tell the enemy stat script, hey, I hit you, I did that amount of damage, and I was a physical kind of damage. And the enemy stats will say, alright, let's check my resistances real quick. I'm gonna calculate how much damage I take, and then we'll deal that much damage to my health bar. So that is basically how the interaction goes down in a cringy, weird way explained. And that is the core functionality of how the movement and combat system in Galantes works. And yeah, if you have questions about it, please let me know. And now we're in the game to see the new lock-on system. If you remember from the overview on the left side, we have the input manager and the Unity input system, which are gonna detect that I press the lock-on button, and the camera controller is then going to check for a nearby target, which is this robot right here, and it's gonna focus on him and switch from the free follow camera, as seen here, controlled by my mouse input, to the lock-on camera. And you will also see that the movement set is going to change. So now I'm pressing WASD. Everything, she turns wherever I want her to go now. And now we lock on with the button. And you see we have a nice little indicator on who we're focusing on. I can move my mouse now, nothing's happening. And we have a different move set. Doesn't look quite polished yet, as mentioned, but it is different. And yeah, you will always turn towards the enemy. That means if I'm going to attack, it will always be in the direction of the enemy. But I can still side roll, back left roll, whatever. I can roll wherever I want. Can also jump, so this is still possible. I can still stop the lock-on and go back to normal movement. So let's fight one of the enemies now with lock-on and see if we land our hits. Yeah, I was just too far off. That was not the problem. Every hit is in there. Let's go. Not doing too much, is he? Nice. And that is the new lock-on system, guys. Alright, and that concludes today's devlog. Once again, I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to call it devlog yet. But I promise I'll try to change that in the future uploads. And as an outlook for the next 2 weeks, I'm thinking about going with the inventory. So we have maybe a UI that you can open with the inventory, and also scriptable objects which you can pick up and put in there. And that will be the first milestone on our way to actually get to the crafting of the game. And in the meantime, I'm still trying to refactor everything that we have and improve on what we already have. And yeah, I'm excited to see what we will end up with in the next 2 weeks. and I will try to document everything as good as possible. And as always, please leave a like if you liked what you saw, or a comment with your opinion on it. And if you want to help out the game and the channel, then please also consider subscribing. And other than that, I wish you a very good start into the week tomorrow, and have a good day. Ruben out.